This isn't clickbait. This tunnel right here is the Blue Ridge Tunnel. It was built in 1858, and now I'm gonna go through it. I'm not scared, you're scared. But this tunnel is not just something scary. It's also revealed something to me about building and about history. So let's go. That's better. Whoa. Okay, so just for some context, I'm in Crozet, which is in the Blue Ridge Mountains, which is about an hour and a half from Richmond and a little bit of distance from Stanton, Virginia. But I'm sure I'll tell you the rest of the facts in my studio. Been working really hard on it, so it should look nice and polished compared to this tunnel. Things have taken a turn for the worse. There, that's better. So let's back up here. Yesterday, I went to the Blue Ridge Tunnel. Here is the straight up Google map, and for years, the tunnel looked like this. But in 2020, the Blue Ridge Tunnel Foundation restored it as a walking path, entirely unlit. It is 4,237 feet of darkness, and I wanted to see it for myself. So I drove out there at the break of dawn. It is 11:26 a.m. I stopped only for sustenance to help me survive. Okay, so this is the headline item. Reese's Potato Chips Big Cup. It's too subtle. I can't taste the potato chip. It was a super spooky, foggy day out there, but I made my way down the long trailhead in the rain to the tunnel to see if I could survive passage through it and back. My nerdy passion came almost entirely from this book right here, The Blue Ridge Tunnel, a remarkable engineering feat in antebellum Virginia by Mary E. Lyons. In the 1830s, Virginia was desperate to expand rail coverage. Lyons says people in Stanton were, among other things, really eager for the quick delivery of oysters. Not my thing, but fair enough. But the only way to get to Stanton and beyond was to go through the mountain. So the state of Virginia actually passed a law for tunneling of the Blue Ridge, a job that seems incredibly daunting, considering that I almost immediately lost my composure the second that I entered into this mountain. Okay, so far I've walked about 50 feet in. I'm really scared and I want to go. But after all that, they met in the middle, and daylight reached the Blue Ridge Tunnel. So I'm out on the other side. That was way more disorienting and confusing than I expected. At one point, it really felt like the ground was moving. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. So before we start, I just went through these tunnels. It was a long walk, and it was a high tunnel. So my question is, how did they actually do it? This tunnel was the brainchild of an engineer named Claudius Crozet. He was in the French military but moved to America and started working for the US military and Virginia Public Works. So he's doing stuff like a treatise on descriptive geometry for the United States military. But Crozet is also making maps like this 1848 one, which showed all the internal improvements to Virginia and helped plan all the future ones. He was soon tasked with building a tunnel through the mountain, and it was never easy. As early as 1851, he was already saying the rock was difficult. And remember, dynamite hadn't been invented yet. Alfred Nobel did that, but not until 1867. So they were using black powder and drills and a lot of hard work. They did have a few tricks to try to make sure that they were doing the job right. To make sure that the train was the right size, they actually built a little fake train so they could test if the walls were high and wide enough. But for the most part, this was just years and years of hard work, and it took them almost a decade to get out of there. I was exhausted after a half hour, and survival wasn't a given. So I was originally going to do this thing where I went through the tunnel with a lantern the first time and a candle the second time. I had it all planned out. I give up. But my candle, it kept blowing out no matter how many times I tried to light it. Now, I don't think this was ghosts. I think this was wind in the tunnel, but it is just one small example of how difficult this whole process was. Here's what I love about this book. So I came into this video basically just wanting to go into the tunnel and have an excuse to do it. And when I did research, I initially thought that my take was going to be that, this is an incredible feat of engineering that they did in the 1850s. How amazing is that? How have we lost our national ambition to build? In the 1850s, they had the gumption to bore through a mountain, all without dynamite. And the newspaper articles, they would have supported that take, for sure. They issued regular pronouncements about the tunnel, but only as if it were an engineering affair. When the tunnel opened, the New York Times called it a nice calculation. But this book taught me that the tunnel, while a huge engineering success, it was also a human disaster. I'm not saying that things are perfect today, but things were appreciably harder for people who toiled in this tunnel. Mary Lyons fills that book with the names of people who died during construction, from accidents, from cholera, or even from fights nearby. Claudius Crozet, he got really mad when the workforce took too much time off for a funeral. That workforce, by the way, it consisted of extremely poor Irish immigrants, child laborers, and enslaved people. The Irish had been driven to America by the Great Famine. That's what I always called the potato famine. They were desperate for work and worked for extremely low wages. All these people were put at great risk for the sake of the internal improvements of Virginia. Something like 180 people died during the construction process. They died from the construction, from accidents, or from cholera that had outbreaks inside the tunnel and the tunnel building community. I'm going to fill this part with random pictures of railroad workers because we don't have photos of those people who died in that tunnel. I just want to hit this point home. Sometimes death numbers aren't very visceral. So there's a story from this biography of Claudius Crozet. It's about a laborer named Michael Curran. He lost his hands in an explosion of black powder. Somewhere in that dark tunnel, they refused to pay him any wages while he recovered. When we build big, ambitious projects, they inspire us, but we should also remember that there are costs. Now, I'm not saying that it's wrong to be ambitious, to want to build big, but it's also important to consider the full scope of a project, including the people who didn't survive it. I can't show you a photo of the people who actually died in those tunnels. All I can show you now are images of the tunnel and the people who were certain from the first step inside that they would make it out into the daylight again. Alright, so if you haven't been here before, this is a personal channel where I post personal videos, history videos. This kind of sits right in the middle because I just wanted to go through this tunnel, but I found the story really interesting and sad thanks to this book. So thank you for writing it to Miss Lyons. Yeah, if you haven't been here before, it would be super helpful if you let me know if you want to see more videos like this, or if you have any other observations about the early engineering efforts that occurred in the 1800s. I also want to recommend that you check out this tunnel. You might be scared like I was, or you might be less scared. I've written into plenty of people who seem just fine with it. Notice how these people aren't scared at all. They seem fine, really happy. All right, that's it for this one. Thank you for watching. I'm gonna try to dig myself out now. Okay, bye.